Hey guys, welcome back to another Kunu's Corner video. Been having a lot of people recently asking me how I made my animations for my weapons in my project I'm working on named called the Exterminator. It's a bit of a convoluted process with a lot of steps, and I wouldn't recommend necessarily doing it this way, though I thought it would be fun to go over how I did it and how I achieved these animations. Before we get started, I want to invite you guys over to my Discord. There's tons of people over there that are very helpful with Easy FPS Editor. It's a nice place to chat and learn more about the engine, so if you feel like you need a little bit of help with your project, I urge you guys to join the Discord. I'll link it down in the description below, and let's get into the meat and potatoes of this video. So essentially, to get started, I had to take a bunch of photos in the first person perspective of the weapons I wanted to incorporate in my game. You'll see here I have a bunch of assets. You can click on a couple here just so you can see. Basically what I did was I set up the tripod, I wrapped my arms around it and tried to get that first person view the best I could. For a lot of them I had my buddy nearby with a clicker, and I would just tell him, okay, I'm ready, and he would click the photo. I would move a little bit, he would click the photo, and so on and so forth. So we ended up with, I would say, a little over 70 frames for each weapon. A lot of these just go over firing and reloading. And then what I had to do after that was each one I had to cut out the background in Photoshop. I had experimented a little bit with using a green screen, though I actually found that the green screen method was no good because that green light bounced off. Anything reflective ended up catching the green light, and so it looked a little bit cheesy once the backgrounds were cut out, so I didn't want that. So I just opted to use, real world lighting conditions. We got a bit of harsh shadows here and there, but I ended up just doing some kit bashing in Photoshop and kind of smoothing those out and removing a lot of the shadows best I could. So once I had all my frames of animation cut out, what I did was I used a animation software named Pivot Animator. A lot of you guys who are familiar with the early days of the stickman culture, the early 2000s, you know Pivot Animator. You had to be there. It was a great time to be alive. But yeah, I use this software because it's really simple, it's really user friendly, and it allowed me to do what I needed to do with no issues. You have your basic ability to add frames, you have onion skins for your animation, you have some opacity controls, and so I found this software was really a good choice. So what I did, and I'll show you now, just imported my sprite pictures here with the background removed. And what I like about Pivot Animator is you actually have a nice frame of reference for your canvas. You can tell that this is the center here, so that kind of makes it a bit helpful when we're talking about Easy FPS Editor and making sure the composition of the view model is where we want it to be. So this gives you a pretty good representation of where it's going to land on the canvas. In Easy FPS Editor, we know that there is some scaling you can do with weapons and you can move them around. So using this as an absolute reference for the center may not be 100% accurate. You can see here, if I actually go down to the not first person, but the aim down sight perspective, you can see it's actually a little bit shifted off from center, and that's because in Easy FPS, I actually opted to kind of scoot the weapon a little bit over to the right, so that made that ADS sight picture a little off center. That's okay though. I did have to do some trial and error to make sure that that ADS picture was landing in the center of the screen on Easy FPS, but we're not going to really talk about that now. So essentially, if we go frame by frame here, you can see I just use Pivot to add some in-between frames to the animation that I captured. It's really nice because you have pretty good control over your sprites, as well as scaling as well. So you can do a lot to take what kind of minimal action frames you have and smooth them out into a little bit of a more robust animation. You can see that this is actually only 2 action frames, but we're able to get a lot more out of it by using that method. You see, if I just go frame by frame, what I did was, and you'll see this a lot with my method, is I'm just using strong keyframes and then smoothing them out with in-betweens. Like we jump from this frame with the hand connected to the magazine, and then this frame, which is actually 2 elements. I separated the hand in Photoshop from the weapon. This way I can smooth out that action of pulling out the magazine. And like with anything, this takes a lot of trial and error. You're going to be playing your animation back a bunch of times, but the end result really speaks for itself. I really am happy with how these turned out here. So in this animation, there's a couple things happening. We got the basic attack, we got the reload, we got the draw and holster, and then we got some additional firing frames. I did that just so I can, in the FSM, randomize the muzzle flash a little bit to give a bit of a more dynamic feel. And I'm really happy with those results. The draw and holster animation is actually, well, really, you see here, it's just the holster, but using FSM, we could just play that animation in reverse, and you get a good draw animation that way as well. That's great. That's the Uzi. Let's check out another one. Go with the boomstick. I'm really happy with the way that animation turned out. This was one of the more difficult ones, just because I had an insane amount of frames I had to cut out to get that animation really smooth. I wasn't totally happy just kind of kit bashing it the way that I did the mini Uzi that you just saw. I really needed that smooth action for when you break the barrel and put those new shells in. I figured the boomstick in a boomer shooter is one of those weapons people are going to want to use a lot, so I figured I better make the animation nice and smooth with that one. You can see that is quite a lot of frames we had to cut out. I was really beating my head with this one. I'd say overall, with all the weapons and assets I had to cut out, it probably took me a little over 2 months to get all of them done. A couple times I took my photos and I just found that the lighting conditions were just not right. It took, again, a bit of trial and error to get that stuff right. I had to essentially like track the sun in the sky and make sure that when I was going outside to take these pictures, even if it was on a different date, you know, months from when I first started, that sun was in the same spot and that the shadows being casted were in the same direction. And so as time passed, I actually had to kind of turn like 90 degrees because the sun was in a different point because seasons were changing. So that made making it consistent rather difficult. And I would say something that I've learned from this is that next time I go to do this like in a studio or something with a white backdrop. That way we have no green bouncing light that doesn't ruin any reflections, and that we can recreate the lighting conditions 100% every single time, because that was just the biggest problem I was having this whole time. I probably remade these weapon animations maybe 5, 6, 7 times before I landed on this last batch that I was really happy with. And even then you'll see some things that, you know, I wish I could kind of fix, but I'm not going to take the time to fix them right now. Like these harsh shadows, yeah, it's just a little bit of an issue, but you know, it is what it is. You see, got those action frames. We end up landing on this third action frame that we smooth out. And this is where it's essentially just frame by frame. A lot of the times where the weapon and a hand is separated in Photoshop, I'll go ahead and separate that into two elements so that we just have a little bit of finer control when it comes to the animation side. You're really going to save yourself a lot of headache by doing that whenever you can. And the boomstick was a bit of a funny one too, because doing it frame by frame like this, I found that it was really hard to get that action of the barrel swinging up. So what I had to do is I had to just gently hold it at different positions while we were taking the photos. Something I'll also do here, which you can see, is I might lay out a couple of my sprites in a row so that while I'm doing the animation, I just have quick access to them and I know which ones I'm going to grab. Because if you see just how many we're working with here, you can lose track really quickly. And I didn't necessarily name my sprites in a way that was going to help me either. I just added a 2 to the original photograph name and, you know, I called it a day. You can see just like the mini Uzi, we got that holster animation that we'll just play in reverse and FSM to get the draw as well. I found that to be really effective. So that's great. We have our animations. They came out great. Now once we're done here, we need to export our animation as separate images. So I'll just do an example right now. Call it boomstick, smooth sprites, and create folder. Now this is the part where we're really adding a little bit of that artistic flair to the sprites. You can see if we go through these, they're basically the same as the photo was taken. I added a little bit of posterization in Photoshop, I believe 11 levels of posterization, or rather 11 colors. So we can go through, and these would look good in easy FPS. However, they're a little bit too high res for my liking. So what I opted to do was run them through a program that can add some pixelization. We can add a dithering effect for the color smoothing, and we can apply our own custom color palette. So the program I'm talking about is called SLK Image to Pix. You can see you have a lot of settings here, as well as dithering settings, your palette settings, and further color refining. And the nice thing about this program is we can load a palette and then load our image and have it apply to it. So I'll show you what that looks like. So I already have a preset made for my weapons. That way, every time I'm running them through, we get the same results and things start to look consistent. So essentially what I did is I loaded my palette. I changed the scale and things to my liking, a little bit of blur, some dithering there, and I saved that preset. So we'll go ahead and add an image of our sprites that we just exported. Let's see, I'll get one of the mid reload ones just so you can see that. Nice. So look at that. That is very nice. I love the look of that. We had this slider in the middle of the screen too. We can see our original photo and see our changes. So basically just what we're doing in this program is we're just adding our color palette, we're reducing the resolution, and adding a bit of dithering to smooth out those color changes. I'll show you what it looks like with no dithering. You get kind of a harsh change of colors. We're working with a 64 color palette here, so that's to be expected when you're working with a bunch of different colors on screen. You see, if I mess with that dithering, you get a nice old school smoothing of colors. My typical setting was somewhere in the middle, or I believe around 51. So nice, that's the effect applied. And what I was doing was I was just then saving it and overwriting the original frame that we exported and doing that one after another until each frame was done. However, I just recently heard that there's a batch version of SLK, and I'll link that in the description below as well as Pivot in case you guys do want to try this method. You can see here up at the top we got batch. You can basically input all of the frames that you want to run through, then put your output and have them all processed in a single batch, which I wish I knew about this earlier, because this would have saved me loads of time. It would have seriously saved me hours and hours. But hey, hindsight's 2020. Now we have it, so anything I do in the future is going to be a lot quicker. So that was pretty much the process. I can go through and show you guys now some of the finished stuff. Somewhere along the line, I wasn't entirely happy with the way that the colors were coming out, so I made a new preset for SLK and kind of fixed some of that up. So here it is. Here's our updated animation, ran through SLK, and it just gives it that extra little layer of artistic flair. I really like the way that these turned out. So thanks guys for watching. I just wanted to make a quick little video showing you guys the process of how I went about making my view model animations for Easy FPS. If you'd like and you're working on an Easy FPS editor game or just want to chat, go ahead and join the Discord linked below. There's tons of friendly people over there. It's a nice community, and yeah, can't wait to see you there. Thanks for watching.